She was captivated and puzzled by the mysterious light. Suddenly, she had a realization, and her heart raced as she comprehended what she was seeing. In a tense voice, she called for her husband. He rushed into the room, stunned by the sight. He began searching on his laptop, trying to locate hidden cameras and determine their origin. Realizing the situation was beyond his expertise, he decided to call the police. Sarah Bowes was tidying up her daughter's room, knowing her daughter would be pleased to return to a clean space. However, during her cleaning, she stumbled upon something astonishing, something she couldn't believe. It had been a long time since she last entered this room. 7 months ago, Jessica, Sarah's daughter, disappeared without any clues or leads, leaving everyone heartbroken. Sarah cherished Jessica deeply. Despite being 18, Jessica was still her little girl, a bright student with loyal friends. Yet, like any teenager, she occasionally clashed with her mother. When the police learned about a recent argument between Jessica and Sarah, they quickly assumed Jessica had run away. Sarah, however, was convinced this wasn't true. Arguments between teenagers and their parents are common and don't always indicate trouble at home, but the police had their perspective. Jessica's room appeared normal, aside from its usual untidiness. With her phone and bag missing, the assumption was she had simply gone out. The police documented the room's state before conducting a thorough search, which ultimately revealed nothing. Believing they had no further leads, the search efforts were reluctantly halted. Joe, Sarah's husband, began to lose hope, but Sarah refused to give up. Determined to prove the police wrong and convinced that Jessica didn't just leave on her own, Sarah was prepared to intensify her search. Despite their occasional disagreements, she knew Jessica would never choose to leave their home. Sarah had only just mustered the strength to go into her daughter's room. She saw the state it was in since the police had searched it. Her room was in such a state, the police had searched every nook and cranny, disregarding how they were wrecking the room. She wanted to clean it, for when, not if, her daughter came home. She was sobbing while she did so. She put everything back in its original place and went towards the bathroom. She had no idea what she was about to uncover. Looking at the mirror, she pictured her daughter brushing her hair there every day and brushing her teeth in front of the mirror. She smiled as she remembered how long her daughter would take in the bathroom straightening her hair. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary as she continued to clean, but then she stumbled upon something that would turn her world upside down. While she cleaned the bathroom, she noticed a red blinking light out the corner of her eye. Inside the mirror handle was something that would have her screaming for her husband. She narrowed her eyes at the strange light and then realized what it was. She could feel her pulse quicken as she called out her husband's name. What Sarah had unwittingly found was a recording camera. She didn't understand why this was here in her daughter's bathroom. Did she do this? No, it seemed too well hidden. Sarah pulled out the camera and showed it to her husband. He had just arrived, hearing her nervous calls to him from upstairs. He didn't know what they had just stumbled upon. "What's wrong?" Joe asked Sarah. "Look," Sarah said as she showed him the small device. Sarah continued to tell him how she found it. As he listened, his heart quickened. He felt stricken with anger. He grabbed his phone, took a picture of it, and raced down to his laptop. He wanted to know exactly what kind of camera this was. He wanted to know everything about it. Little did he know, the truth would only bring more misery. His blood boiled. This had to have been planted by someone else. He couldn't type fast enough as he researched everything about it and how to find the device it was connected to. He devoted hours to research, and it eventually paid off. Tracking the device was possible, but they needed expert assistance. They quickly reached out to the police, who initially hesitated but became fully engaged once Sarah presented them with the photos. The authorities took the device and sought help from the FBI, providing Sarah with the breakthrough she needed to prove that her daughter's disappearance was more complex than it appeared. As they waited for updates from the police, Sarah and Joe tried to distract themselves, but their minds were fixed on the significance of their discovery. The wait was filled with anxiety, but when they finally received news from the officers, they were astounded by the findings. The police called the Bowes and told them that the camera was connected to a device that was only a few houses down their street. In fact, it led to her friend, Matt's house. Matt was a friend of Jessica's who went to the same school as her. He'd often come over to the house to visit Jessica. From what his parents knew, he seemed very fond of her, but they had no idea. The officer informed Sarah and Joe of the update and told them that the police will be going to the house shortly. He told them to wait until they hear from them again, but they didn't listen. Despite the warning to wait for the cops to arrive to approach the house, Sarah and her husband ran down the street. They were desperate to find out more, and they felt like they had no time to waste, but they should have waited for the cops. The Bows ran down the street, and Joe knocked on the family's front door. They stood back, out of breath, waiting for an explanation, anything. But what was waiting for them was much, much more. There was no answer. They went around the house and looked in all the windows. It seemed like no one was home. But Joe had his mind set on getting in. However, just before he did any damage, sirens arrived. Just before Joe was about to throw a rock through the window, the cops arrived and busted in through the front door. They ordered Sarah and Joe to wait outside while they raided the house. Again, Sarah and Joe were left waiting anxiously outside for word on what the officers would find. They couldn't handle much more of this. They hoped all of this would come to an end soon and that their daughter would return home. The officers entered the suspicious house one by one. None of them had any idea what they would find. They didn't know if they were walking into yet another dead end or the dragon's den. Thankfully, they were prepared for the latter. It wasn't long before the officers heard muted screams that led them to a locked room upstairs. Tentatively, they'd approached it. With their weapons at the ready, they asked whoever was inside to open the door. There was shuffling on the door handle, but it wouldn't open. It was then the police realized the door was locked. The police burst through the door, expecting to confront danger, but were stunned to find Jessica, crying with relief at being found. She seemed unharmed, yet it was clear she had been held captive. Upon hearing her parents were outside, she rushed to embrace them in a tearful reunion. Jessica revealed the harrowing details of her captivity. She had discovered a hidden camera in her bathroom, planted by a friend. When she confronted him and threatened to involve the police, he panicked and locked her in a room for 7 months. Although she was never physically harmed and was provided with food and a TV, her phone was taken, cutting off all contact with the outside world. Sarah felt like she was in a nightmare, with her daughter's ordeal resembling something from a crime documentary. She was overjoyed to have Jessica back, but was plagued by questions. How had the police missed the camera, and how had her captor's parents not noticed their son was hiding someone in their house? It turned out the camera was remotely controlled, and the police hadn't seen it because it was turned off. The captor's parents had moved out, leaving him alone in the house. Sarah had fortunately been present when he turned the camera back on. As for the captor, he fled when Sarah and Joe approached, but the police quickly apprehended him. He's now awaiting trial, facing charges pressed by Jessica and her parents for his heinous actions.